Good morning. It is Thursday, June the 13th, and this is The Drill. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Ronald T. Hardgrove, and this podcast is called The Drill. It's about being a true conservative as opposed to being a reactionary or even a traditionalist. It's about what true conservatism is and why it matters. My podcast is made possible by Spreaker.com. It can be heard on iTunes and Spotify, among others. And my email address is storytimes@hotmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Ronald Hardgrove and on Facebook at under The Drill. So being a true conservative is knowing that the essence of any argument is change. It's about change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is conservative. And if it ain't broke, break it is liberal/socialist. The left is always creating movements towards socialist paradise. And a reactionary is dogmatic and defiant of those movements and seeks to create counter-movements. And in the process, aids and abets the people on the left. A true conservative is open-minded but unmoved unless there's a good reason to be moved. Being truly conservative is also about integrity. Maintaining your integrity is about listening carefully, reading carefully. It's also about fundamentally consistency. You cannot be a conservative if you vote conservative, but you act like you're a socialist. If you think like a socialist, act like a socialist, then you're more likely a socialist than a conservative, even if you vote like a conservative. It's about not getting tricked, about responding and not reacting. And integrity is not just about how you live or how you vote, but how you live. True conservative is not merely a political identity, but a philosophical reality. And true conservatism is fundamentally about being realistic, and being realistic is fundamentally about making the presumption for the status quo. And now, when the waters were changed. Once upon a time, Kadir, the teacher of Moses, called upon mankind with a warning. At a certain date, he said, all the water in the world which had not been specially hoarded would disappear. It would then be renewed with different water which would drive men mad. Only one man listened to the meaning of this advice. He collected water and went to a secure place where he stored it and waited for the water to change its character. On the appointed date, the streams stopped running, the wells went dry, and the man who had listened, seeing this happening, went to his retreat and drank his preserved water. When he saw from his security the waterfalls again beginning to flow, the man descended among the other sons of men. He found that they were thinking and talking in an entirely different way from before, yet they had no memory of what had happened, nor of having been warned. When he tried to talk to them, he realized that they thought that he was mad. And they showed hostility or compassion, not understanding. At first, he drank none of the new water, but went back to his concealment to draw on his supplies every day. Finally, however, he took the decision to drink the new water, because he could not bear the loneliness of living, behaving, and thinking in a different way from everyone else. He drank the new water and became like the rest. Then he forgot all about his own store of special water, and his fellows began to look upon him as a madman who had miraculously been restored to sanity. So that is from Idris Shah, Tales of the Dervishes. And when I come back, I'll be reading about the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. Thank you very much. And the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon is genocide. There is no principle by which genocide, a crime against a group of men, can be regarded as morally different from, or worse than, a crime against an individual. The difference is only quantitative, not moral. It can be easily demonstrated that communism means and requires the extermination, the genocide, if you wish, of a particular human species, the men of ability. And that was genocide, the concept of the day from the Ayn Rand lexicon. And when we come back, an entry from the Conservative Dictionary. Thank you. Welcome back. The entry is Hillary Clinton, and it's a little bit of a bio. It's got some stuff in it that's interesting that I didn't know about her before. Hillary Clinton, born Hillary Diane Rodham in Chicago, Illinois on 26 October 1947, is an American radical and Democratic Party politician. Hillary's parents, Hugh Ellsworth Rodham and Dorothy Emma Howell Rodham, were staunch conservatives, and Hillary worked to uncover voter fraud against Richard Nixon after the 1960 election, and in 1964 campaigned for Barry Goldwater. In 1965, Rodham enrolled in Wellesley College, where she was so imbued with liberal and anti-American indoctrination that by 1968 she declared herself a Democrat. Her senior thesis at Wellesley was on the tactics for inciting civil disobedience espoused by Rules for Radicals author Saul Alinsky. After Wellesley, Rodham entered Yale Law School, where in 1971 she met and started dating fellow law student Bill Clinton. During the summer of 1971, Rodham interned at the California law firm of Treuhaft, Walker, and Bernstein, two of whose partners were members of the Communist Party. Following her rejection of Clinton's post-graduation offer of marriage, Rodham began a year of postgraduate studies at the Yale Child Study Center. She had always been interested in children's rights, and during this time she served as an attorney for the Cambridge, Massachusetts Children's Defense Fund. In 1974, she served as an attorney advising the House Judiciary Committee on Watergate, resulting in the resignation of Richard Nixon, the same man she had sought to rescue from Democratic voter fraud 14 years earlier. In 1975, she succumbed to Clinton's persistent offers of marriage and moved to Arkansas, where Bill was elected Arkansas Attorney General in 1976 and governor of Arkansas 2 years later. In February 1980, Hillary gave birth to a daughter, Chelsea. In November of that year, Bill lost his bid for re-election to Republican Frank White. Bill returned to the Arkansas State House in 1982 and remained there until 1990. From 1982 to 88, Hillary served on the board of the New World Foundation, a liberal organization fomenting campus protests. In 1992, Bill Clinton was elected President of the United States, and Hillary became First Lady, following 8 years of deflecting public attention from her husband's sexual peccadillos. Hillary bought a house in Chappaqua, New York, a state in which she had never resided, and in 2000 ran for and won the Senate seat of retiring New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Hillary won re-election to the Senate in 2006, but in 2007 she announced her candidacy for president in the 2008 election. Late in the campaign, DNC Chairman Howard Dean convinced Hillary to accept a position as Secretary of State in the Obama administration in return for her dropping out of the race and leaving the field to Obama. In September 2012, Secretary Clinton was deeply involved in an Obama administration cover-up of a military attack on a Benghazi, Libya CIA compound that was being used to illegally smuggle arms to Islamic jihadists seeking to overthrow the government of Syria. And that was a small bio of Hillary Rodham Clinton. Back in a minute. Thank you. So the reactionary mind, and it is equating, basically it's a book that's equating conservatism with being a reactionary. And of course I contend that that's not the case, that they're two separate things. Being a conservative is one thing and being a reactionary is something else. But this is an incredibly interesting section of the book right here. There is more to this antagonistic structure of argument than the simple antinomies of partisan politics, the oppositional position taking that is a requirement of winning elections. As Karl Mannheim argued, what distinguishes conservatism from traditionalism, the universal vegetative tendency to remain attached to things as they are, which is manifested in non-political behaviors such as a refusal to buy a new pair of pants until the current pair is shredded beyond repair, is that conservatism is a deliberate, conscious effort to preserve or recall, quote, those forms of experience which can no longer be had in an authentic way, unquote. Conservatism, quote, becomes conscious and reflective when other ways of life and thought appear on the scene, against which it is compelled to take up arms in the ideological struggle, unquote. Where the traditionalist can take the objects of desire for granted, he can enjoy them as if they are at hand because they are at hand, the conservative cannot. He seeks to enjoy them precisely as they are being or have been taken away. If he hopes to enjoy them again, he must contest their divestment in the public realm. He must speak of them in a language that is politically serviceable and intelligible. But as soon as those objects enter the medium of political speech, they cease to be items of lived experience and become incidents of an ideology. They get wrapped in a narrative of loss, in which the revolutionary or reformist plays a necessary part and presented in a program of recovery. What was tacit becomes articulate, what was fluid becomes formal, what was practice becomes polemic. Even if the theory is peon to practice, as conservatism often is, it cannot escape becoming a polemic. The fussiest conservative who would deign to enter the street is compelled by the left to pick up a paving stone and toss it at the barricades. As Lord Hailsham put it in his 1947 Case for Conservatism, conservatives do not believe that political struggle is the most important thing in life. In this, they differ from communists, socialists, Nazis, fascists, social creditors, and most members of the British Labour Party. The simplest among them prefer fox hunting, the wisest religion. To the great majority of conservatives, religion, art, study, family, country, friends, music, fun, duty, all the joy and riches of existence of which the poor, no less than the rich, are the indefeasible freeholders, all these are higher in the scale than their handmaiden, the political struggle. This makes them easy to defeat at first, but once defeated, they will hold to this belief with the fanaticism of a crusader and the doggedness of an Englishman, unquote. Because there is so much confusion about conservatism's opposition to the left, it's important that we be clear about what the conservative is and is not opposing in the left. It is not change in the abstract. No conservative opposes change as such or defends order as such. The conservative defends particular orders, hierarchical, often private regimes of rule, on the assumption in part that hierarchy is order. Quote, order cannot be had, unquote, declared Johnson, quote, but by subordination, unquote. For Burke, it was axiomatic that, quote, when the multitude are not under this discipline, unquote, of, quote, the wiser, the more expert, and the more opulent, unquote, they can scarcely be said to be in a civil society, unquote. In defending such orders, moreover, the conservative invariably launches himself on a program of reaction and counter-revolution, often requiring an overhaul of the very regime he is defending. Quote, if we want things to stay as they are, in Lampdus's classic formulation, quote, things will have to change, unquote. To preserve the regime, as I show in part one, the conservative must reconstruct the regime. This program entails far more than cliches about, quote, preservation through renovation, unquote, would suggest. Often it can require the conservative to take the most radical measures on the regime's behalf. Some of the stuffiest partisans of order on the right have been more than happy when it has suited their purpose to indulge in a little bit of mayhem and madness. Kirk, the self-styled Burkean, wished to, quote, espouse conservatism with the vehemence of a radical. The thinking conservative, in truth, must take on some of the outward characteristics of the radical today. He must poke about the roots of society in the hope of restoring vigor to an old tree strangled in the rank undergrowth of modern passions, unquote. That was 1954. 15 years later, at the height of the student movement, he wrote, quote, having been for 2 decades a mordant critic of what is foolishly called the higher learning in America, I confess to relishing somewhat the fulfillment of my predictions and the present plight of the education establishment. I even own to a sneaking sympathy after a fashion with the campus revolutionaries, unquote. In God and Man at Yale, William F. Buckley declared conservatives, quote, the new radicals, unquote. Upon reading the first few issues of National Review, Dwight MacDonald was inclined to agree. Quote, had Buckley been born a generation earlier, he would have been making the cafeteria of 14th Street ring with Marxian dialectics, unquote. Even Burke himself wrote that, quote, the madness of the wise, unquote, is, quote, better than the sobriety of fools, unquote. There's a fairly simple reason for the embrace of radicalism on the right, and it has to do with the reactionary imperative that lies at the core of conservative doctrine. The conservative not only opposes the left, he also believes that the left has been in the driver's seat since, depending on who's counting, the French Revolution or the Reformation. If he is to preserve what he values, conservatives must declare war against the culture as it is. Though the spirit of militant opposition pervades the entirety of conservative discourse, Dinesh D'Souza has put the case most clearly. Quote, typically the conservative attempts to conserve, to hold on to the values of the existing society. But what if the existing society is inherently hostile to conservative beliefs? It is foolish for a conservative to attempt to conserve that culture. Rather, he must seek to undermine it, to thwart it, to destroy it at the root level. This means that the conservative must be philosophically conservative, but temperamentally radical. By now, it should be clear that it is not the style or pace of change that the conservative opposes. The conservative theorist likes to draw a, quote, manifest marked distinction, in quote, unquote, between revolutionary reform and radical change. The first is slow, incremental, and adaptive. The second is fast, comprehensive, and by design. So I thought that was a fascinating little section in there. Again, getting into what conservatism is and is not, and how it compares to traditionalism. Again, they have too much of a tendency to conflate conservatism with reactionary, being a reactionary. And I contend that they're two completely separate things. Now, Dinesh D'Souza gets it right when he's talking about how the true conservative must be philosophically conservative. He recognizes that being a conservative goes deeper than just politics. It goes to culture, it goes to metaphysics, it goes to epistemology, the whole 9 yards, the whole enchilada, so to speak. So that concludes that particular. Yep, that's what I thought. Okay, and so when I come back, what am I going to be reading from next? It's going to be. Well, we'll see in a minute. Thank you very much. So one I haven't read from in a while is called Bullies. How the Left's Culture of Fear and Intimidation Silences America. And this is a section from the first chapter called Non-Profit Bullies. In 2004, perverse former conservative David Brock, a highly paranoid alleged drug devotee, founded Media Matters for America. It was an offshoot of the John Podesta-run Center for American Progress. Podesta, of course, was the former chief of staff to President Clinton, and the Center for American Progress was a liberal nonprofit designed to act as an outlet for leftist politicians and viewpoints. The Center for American Progress originally granted office space to Media Matters. Hillary Clinton advised it, and one of her closest confidants received some $200,000 to help out. Clinton even explained, quote, "I wish only that we had this active and fighting blogosphere about 15 years ago, because we have certainly suffered over the last years from a real imbalance in the political world in our country. But we are righting that balance, or lefting that balance, not sure which, and we are certainly better prepared and more focused on taking our arguments and making them effective and disseminating them widely and really putting together a network in the blogosphere in a lot of the new progressive infrastructure institutions that I helped to start and support, like Media Matters and the Center for American Progress. We're beginning to match what I had said for years was the advantage of the other side," unquote. So let me see. Here it is. Not sure which, and we are certainly better prepared and more focused on taking our arguments and making them effective. And the left has no arguments. The left doesn't operate that way. The left operates from why not? And why not is a power move. Why not is not designed to elicit an argument. It cannot, because why not it's like having a chip on your shoulder and saying, "I dare you to knock this chip off my shoulder." Why not, let's use marijuana as an example, why not legalize marijuana? That's an attitude. It's not an intellectual expression. Okay, and what they're inviting people on the right to do, their political opponents to do, is get in a fight with them. So they're not interested in presenting arguments, logic, rhetoric, grammar, They're looking into using psychology and psychologistic tools and techniques in order to bully and intimidate their opponents. Back to the book. The goal of Media Matters is simple. Play defense for liberal politicians, and do it by attacking mercilessly all right-wing points of view. Media Matters' bias is so obvious that even wild leftists like NBC's Chuck Todd, who had a shrine to President Obama, complete with lubricants and scented candles, can't deal with them. Back in 2007, he pointed out that Media Matters was shilling for its erstwhile ally Hillary with a list of don'ts suggested for debate moderators. Quote, their don'ts read more like facetious attacks on Edwards and Obama, right out of the oppo shop of either the RNC or, say, opponents of Edwards and Obama. By repeating these things, isn't Media Matters doing Clinton or other opponents of Edwards and Obama a favor, unquote? Or, as David Falkenflick of NPR put it, quote, they're looking at every dangling participle, every dependent clause, every semicolon, every quotation to see if there's some way it unfairly frames a cause, a party, a candidate that they may have some feelings for, unquote. It didn't matter. The left loved it. As the New York Times reported, producers for The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and The Colbert Report coordinate regularly with Media Matters. James Carville, master Democrat strategist, said, quote, it was always kind of a dream that we needed something like that, unquote. The funding flowed in, especially from leftist bullies like George Soros and the Tides Foundation. By November 2008, the organization, which, remember, provided no actual service other than Alinskyite distortion of conservative words, had grown to more than 100 employees and $8 million in budget. While its longtime boss, Eric Burns, insisted that the organization had, quote, leveled the playing field and maybe given Barack Obama a fair shake, unquote, he said, quote, I'm not the Obama campaign. We're an independent organization not beholden to anybody. It's bigger than any one candidate. It's bigger than any one election, unquote. This is Media Matters' favorite line. They constantly say they're not coordinating with President Obama. That's a lie. As it turns out, Media Matters is in the back pocket of the Obama administration and acts as their go-between for other media outlets. When Brock wasn't too busy reportedly indulging in illicit substances, he raised $50,000 for Obama. What's more shocking is that Brock's organization coordinates on a weekly basis with the White House. They were planning to spend some $20 million in 2012 to help Obama, Anita Dunn, and high-ranking Obama administration member to use to visit the Media Matters headquarters regularly. And so that is the section from Nonprofit Bullies from the book Bullies, How the Left's Culture of Fear and Intimidation Silences Americans. So when I come back, I have a little blurb from Rush Limbaugh that gives an excellent example of what I'm talking about when I say that the pundits that call themselves conservatives are no such thing. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. So I'm going to play a little blurb from the Rush Limbaugh. It's his app, and it comes from rushlimbaugh.com, and we'll go from there.
This deal with Mexico was done months ago, and Trump is just faking that it had to do with the tariffs. You mean there wasn't a crisis at the border until Trump triggered something? How does Trump trigger a crisis in the border? What's clear is that he alone is trying to do something to stop it.
Okay, so... Oh, wait a minute here. There we go. So, the point I'm making with this is that what he's talking about, this is a comment he made a couple of days ago. The situation on the border happened on a Friday, I think the Friday before, and so last Friday. So last Friday, President Trump announces that he's going to increase tariffs on the Mexican government, on Mexican products coming to the United States, 5% per week until we get to 25%, unless and until the Mexican government does something about the border and does something about the Guatemalans and Hondurans that are coming across their country and going north to the United States. So then there's a big deal over the weekend about whether or not he should be able to do this. And of course, Democrats were very upset about it, trying to suggest that there might be some bullying going on here, and whatnot. But by the time the weekend was over, Mexico and the United States had reached a deal. And that President Trump had declared the whole situation a success. And I'd said at the time that there's no conservatives that are covering this. None of the conservatives on Friday were bothering to deal with probably the biggest news of the day. And positive news for President Trump. I mean, what other conservative president has the guts to do what he did? He didn't ask anybody's permission. He didn't go out and conduct a poll or a survey. He didn't go talk to Congress first. He decided this on his own. I think he may have talked to his lawyers to find out whether or not the President of the United States has the power to do that. But other than that, again, most other Republican presidents would have dithered. They would have wasted a lot of time checking with all kinds of people. Let's check with the Republicans. Let's check with the Democrats. Let's check with this, that, and the other thing. And then if they do come up with some kind of a statement, or they come out with some kind of a plan, it's weak and ineffective. And Donald Trump doesn't do that. He doesn't play that game. But that was the story of the day on that particular Friday. Rush Limbaugh waits to report on this whole thing until after the New York Times runs an article condemning what the president did and basically belittling his efforts by saying there was nothing new and that maybe this whole thing, the fix was in, that Donald Trump had somehow was some kind of a master manipulator here, and that the conclusions of this were foregone, and that kind of thing. That's when he starts talking about this issue. Only after the left, the New York Times, starts talking about this issue. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about Rush Limbaugh not being a conservative, but being a reactionary. He doesn't go out and look for and ask himself, what are our values? And look for positive things to talk about. Hey, look what Donald or the president is doing here. Let me discuss this with my listeners and let them know what's good or bad about what he's doing. Right? No. he's got to react. Wait till the New York Times says boo, and then he comes out and tries to disprove whatever the New York Times has come out to say about it. It's wrong. It's a bad idea. It, again, constantly gives your audience the impression that conservatives are losing the game, that we're constantly on defensive, and psychologically it just wears you down. Eventually, you're going to give up. You're going to throw up your hands and say, forget it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Concentrate on, quit being reactionary, quit getting up in the morning and looking to figure out what it is the left is doing, and concentrate more on what your own people are doing, first and foremost. If there's something that the left is doing that isn't completely arbitrary, that requires some kind of a comment or a response, fine, then you respond. But other than that, you ignore the left, because if you don't, then what you do is you aid and abet the left, and you do so by making them look more intellectual, making them look smarter, make them look bigger, fiercer, meaner, tougher than they really are. So, what is, let's see, here we go. Who are the true conservatives? The true conservatives, let me see where we are the people that understand that conservatism is a lifestyle. They are patriotic people who use common sense. They make judgments instead of predictions. They speak clearly and definitively and are not afraid to say no. They are open-minded, asking why rather than why not. They are consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of their existence, unafraid to learn or correct their mistakes. They are normal Americans. And that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening and have a great day.